Hello, team, and welcome. I've had the time of my life, and I owe you all a class. Some of my students have requested this one, and it is a doozy. Throughout my over a decade teaching English, there are a few topics that always generate some problems. In on and at, make and do for my Brazilians, two and four as well. And the last one, have, has, had. And it's something that can be quite frustrating for my Brazilian students who do not have the direct equivalent in Portuguese. But what we're going to try to do today is make it as fun as possible. We're going to mix it together with a topic that everybody loves, which is traveling. So, team, welcome, and we will see what we can do. So we'll be talking about have, has, and had. I will talk about this in other episodes throughout the year. I have never seen kind of a direct download where somebody, okay, understood everything, I'm good. So we will see this more times. We'll be talking about a bucket list. It's your expression of the week, bucket list. Things you want to do in your life. And traveling is our general theme. So just take a look at this quick video right here. What is an amazing place you have traveled to? When I ask these warm-up questions, there's usually a reason. In this case, it's to see where your starting point is. Where am I trying to get to? Try to answer in complete sentences. For example, what is an amazing place you have traveled to? An amazing place I have traveled to is Ireland. What three places are on your bucket list? Three places on my bucket list that I have never been to: Tibet, Japan, and Greece, I guess. I'm going to pick those three. And where had you never been until last year? Travel much. I'd have to make one up. I'm sorry. I don't think I traveled anywhere new last year, but maybe a waterfall that I had never been to until last year. So we will get into detail into these three examples, but we're going to start with that. Number one, what is the difference between have and has? Team, remember that S, when we're talking in the third person singular, so I, you, we, they always have. But he, she, it, Maria, the weather, this bottle, whatever it is, if you're talking about someone or something else, it's going to become has. There is one exception that sometimes creates some confusion, which is when we mix it with a modal verb. So should, would, could, may, might, any of these. Afterwards, you will always use have. No has, no had, no having. Always the base form of the verb. Part two, the difference between the present and the past perfect. Have, and whenever I say have, I mean have or has. Have is a signal in English, and whenever you hear it, you're supposed to think before the present. I have been to Ireland. When? You do not know. The only thing you do know is that before the present, I have been there. So we have this use, which we call unspecified time, when you do not know when something happened other than it happened before the present. Really, the only time word you can use is before. Maybe if you're asking a question, you can use, have you ever done this? Have you ever eaten sushi? Have you ever been to this place? But we do not use ever when we're making statements. The second use for the present perfect is with something that started in the past and extends until the present. So if I say I have lived in Brazil for many years, you can't really say it's the past because 5 years ago I was here. You can't really say it's the present because, well, I guess the opposite. You can't really say it's the present because 5 years ago I was here. And you can't say it was the past because I am still here now. So when we have this bridge, we use this have. We use the present perfect. So again, remember, you hear the word have, I want you thinking before now. Now, this gets to part two, which is the past perfect. Let's take a look at this example. I went to Ireland in 2019, but I had been to Europe once before. If you think of this as the present, right now, me talking to you, and then you think of this as 2019, when I went to Ireland, I had been to Europe once before. If I say I went to Europe last year, if I say I went to Europe 1,000 years ago, it doesn't make a difference. They're both the past. This has to do with perspective when we're speaking about something that happened before the past. Two pieces of good news. Number one, we don't use it much. And part two, it's also one of those rare rules in English that doesn't really have an exception. If you're talking about something that happened before the past, had done, had eaten, had gone, had exists, but it'll be had with the past tense. It's good to know how to use it. Everything is important. All knowledge is worth having. But really, if you know how to use the present perfect well, this one is the big difference. You know, you can, I guess, you can speak in English without it, but you will reach a certain level that you cannot pass. So I do think this is worth practicing. Last up, I often get questions about the difference between the perfect simple and the perfect continuous. And I divided it into these 3 points. The perfect simple focuses on the completion, while the continuous focuses on the process. So if I say I have planned my next trip, it's pretty much done. I've planned it. We're good to go. I've already found my Airbnb and bought my tickets. If I say I have been planning my next trip, you imagine me doing my research online. I'm not sure if I'm going to rent a car, so I'm in the middle of it. Process. Number 2, with all examples that involve simple and continuous, the simple focuses on the fact. If I say I have planned my next trip, you go, cool, understood. And if I say I have been planning my next trip, you kind of imagine me on the keyboard searching stuff. So you imagine action. Part 3, with the perfect simple, we are talking only to before that point. If I say I have lived in Brazil for many years, maybe I'm tired of Brazil. Maybe I'm going back. Maybe I'm going to take my family and move to the United States. Maybe I'm going to stay here for the rest of my life. We do not have that information. It's the idea ends at this point. Now, if I say I have been living in Brazil for many years, I'm talking about before now, many years, and I'm guaranteeing that I will continue living here. So the small difference, you also cannot use the ing form for state verbs. What is a state verb? One where there is no action. For example, I have known Patricia for many years. I cannot say I have been knowing her unless every morning go, hello, I'm John. Hello, I'm Patricia. So there's no action there. So you would avoid the ing form for state verbs. I have noticed my Brazilian students find this ing form more comfortable. It makes more sense when we're talking about unfinished time that started in the past. Team, I like to work step by step. Learn to use one well. I think this is the easiest place to start. Unspecified time. You have done this. You haven't done this. Then part 2, you switch into unfinished time. See which one you find more comfortable. Team, that's it for today. There are more details. There is some more nuance, but these 3, it's already a lot. So, try to digest this information. The best way to practice this is to try to teach it to somebody else. If you can do that, you're golden. Some quick sentences for you to practice. Let me give you some examples on my own. Let me see. I have seen The Sopranos before. I haven't skydived yet. This year has been amazing so far. I had never gotten surgery until last year. I had been out with Lise before class started. So those are my examples. Think of your own. And let's get to our next activity, which is the bucket list. Not everything is about traveling, but of course you can include some examples. That is not a problem. But I picked some of mine. These are real things. I've always wanted to learn to play the saxophone. If you can, try to include your halves. It's not necessary for this activity. I prefer you to have fun and get some practice in than to force the practice and not have fun. So I've always wanted to learn to play the saxophone. Those cool fedoras, maybe some suspenders. But one day, it's not a priority. Living in Japan has been on my bucket list for a long time. This is true. I've always wanted to live in Japan. I had always wanted to skydive, but once I found out I was going to become a father, I was like, I'll wait a few years, wait until they're older. And so I've put that one on pause. But I had always wanted to skydive, so I was able to get some past perfect practice in as well. Now, team, if you're here, if you are listening to me speaking, I know you want to improve your English. Nobody's listening to this for fun. So hopefully it's a little bit fun, but it's not just. And that means that you have a goal, you have a dream, and that dream, that goal is what will keep you practicing, keep you improving. So what's on your English bucket list? I put a couple of examples here. Now, watch and understand a movie or series in English without subtitles. Whenever a student of mine does this, they always tell me. So I know it's something big. It's a nice milestone to watch it and understand it. Read a book in English. Again, my students, they always tell me when they start reading a book. So I know it's something that people want. Pick something that's good, something that there is no translation into your own language. Have a comfortable conversation with a stranger in English. Who doesn't want that? So, what's on your English bucket list? And if it's something that you can take a first step in, do it. Bonus round, I saw this video about a reverse bucket list. I thought it was curious. Not 100% on board, but I think it's worth thinking about. Take a look. What are your thoughts? Why can't frogs ever complete their bucket lists? Answer at the bottom. And let me pick one of these to do with you guys. What have you been doing that you think is productive but isn't? It's hard to say it, but I think maybe the expressions of the week. I've been insisting on this and kind of had a plan with it, but I don't know. It might be taking up time that I could use for other types of videos. If you watch this, let me know what your thoughts are. Team, thank you. That's it. Like always, it's a pleasure. I hope you have had a good time. I hope you've improved your English knowledge and that this class hasn't been too tedious. But team, thank you, and I hope to see you in class.